What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Quarters Podcast. It's been far too long, but we are back after the NFL Combine. We're talking top wide receiver prospects in the 25 NFL Draft. We're going to go through our top 10, and then we're going to look at our consensus rankings, talk about some guys that are just on the outside of our top 10, and it's going to be fun. It's exciting to kind of get on here and talk it up with the boys, and we're talking wide receivers. All right, we're going to go through our 6 through 10 for each of us as we kind of go through here. And then we're going to bounce around the board a little bit. We're just going to be calling our shots, talking about these prospects as we go. There's no perfect way of doing ranking shows. It's always clunky and hard, but we're going to try it this way. So I have 6 through 10 for me is Jalen Noel, Ty Felton at 7, Trey Harris at 8, Alec Amaner at 9, and then Jaden Higgins at 10. Randy has Matthew Golden at 6, 7 is Jalen Noel, 8 is Trey Harris, 9 is Jack Beck. The ever wonder workout man. He is athletic as hell. We're going to get into that. And then Jalen Royal sitting there at 10 for him. And then Christian's got Trey Harris at 6, Jalen Noel at 7, 8 is Jack Beck, 9 is Tej Johnson, and Torrey Horton at 10. And I will say this, we have a lot of discrepancies in this group of guys. There's a lot of guys moving around, and there's going to be more that pop up to the top. Just based on kind of what we're going to see from the pro days, incomplete kind of workouts. There's some things there, but I think we got to start with Tej Johnson. So, when you're looking at the rankings, Christian's got him in his top 10. Me and Randy do not. So we're kind of on the outside looking there. He didn't have the greatest 40. When you're looking at kind of his 40 and what he was able to put on the board, I think that concerns some people there. 4.51, right? Is that what he went? That was it. What was he at? Yeah.
4.51 officially, and his 10-yard split wasn't good either. 1.58.
Yeah, so he goes down a little bit. He's also 154 pounds, which I mean he's probably in the 140s if we're talking like real weight here. But Christian, you still have him in 9. Why is he hanging on for you?
So I still think that. So when you look at his whole body of work at the combine, it's really important to consider the explosiveness and the agility stuff. He was elite in both of those areas. And that's the stuff that pops up on film. He gets open, he catches everything. He plays bigger than he is, which obviously he has to, being 154 pounds. I will say, throughout his entire evaluation, I think I was hoping more like 170 pounds. We've never really seen a player at 154 be an impactful player at the NFL level. My thing with Tez is I think he can be a good slot because he's so shifty. He's got an elite ability to get open with his routes. I think he's a menace after the catch because he's really tough to bring to the ground. I mean, once you get your hands on him, he's going to the ground because he's 154 pounds. But it's a struggle to get your hands on him. He's super elusive. I think he's got some of the surest hands in the class. So while I talk about him like he's a top 5 guy and I think he's going to be super impactful, I mean, he's down at wide receiver 9. There was a point in time where, I mean, he's still probably my favorite small wide receiver because I wouldn't classify too many of the guys ahead of him as small wideouts. But there was a time where I thought he could be a really, Tank Dell-esque type of player. I think maybe we're Tank Dell light, and with Tank Dell's injury history at the NFL level, I think that's where the concern comes in. So he's still hanging on inside my top 10 because I do think the film's really good. It's just, I've never seen a player at 154. We're going to find out if he can play,
Yeah, a Tank Dell light is just something I never thought I'd ever hear. So that's why he just has to keep going lower and lower for me, unfortunately. I agree with Christian. I thought playing weight was probably going to be, the hope was like 160 something, and then weigh in weight with water weight and everything this week would have been 170. And for it to be, 20 pounds less, likely without the water in the 140s, like Kevin said, that's a rough outline for me. If we're talking such a outlier, it's scary. That's why it's almost like a no for me.
Yeah. That's the outlier part for me because I just don't know what he is, and I think that I can't put him in that top 10 just based on that because I think there's other guys in this class down here when we're talking about like Jaden Higgins, even Alec, Trey Harris, guys like that for me that may be a little lower than consensus like Christian has them, but like I'd rather have those type of guys, those prototypical X type of guys in this draft than take an outlier on Tez because like I like Tank. I think Tank Dell's a better receiver than Tez Johnson was, though. Like I in my opinion, just looking at it from college, I would rather have Tank Dell. And we haven't necessarily seen. I mean, we've seen some good with Tank Dell. We've also seen the bad. Like he got knocked weirdly from behind, and then he's out for the year, and that could happen with Tez as well. Any final thoughts here on Tez, Christian?
I just wanted to mention that Tank Dell was a worse athlete as far as relative athletic score goes. So like 5.82, he ran a little faster, but Tank Dell ran 4.49 too. So like it is kind of comparable. He was 165 at that time. I assume he's probably his play weight is going to be closer to 175 when he gets back on the field, if he gets back on the field. But Tez Johnson ended up with a 7.66 unofficial relative athletic score compared to Tank Dell's 5.82. So it's interesting because the explosives, Dell didn't do the agility testing. So I think that's notable because I think he would have done pretty well in it and it would have boosted him the same way it did Tez. But being lighter than Tank Dell is not a good thing by any means. Definitely not a great part of this evaluation.
All right, let's go. Let's jump over to Jack Beck. So Randy has him at 9. Christian has him at 8. You know, when you're looking at relative athletic score for him, 9.26, I think is what it came out. Or did he run the 40? What is it now?
He didn't.
He
It's
did not, right?
9.45 right now, though.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, when you're looking at that, over 9, you like to see there. Didn't run, but you love his 3 cone, what he was able to put down there. And he's super athletic, just seems athletic there. We've talked about Beck before, though. We mentioned him. He had a kind of a big Senior Bowl game and kind of scored that touchdown, you know, in memory of his brother who passed away in that New Orleans terror attack. So, Randy, what did you think about Jack? And why did you put him in your 10?
Yeah, he has a relative size that I want, and he's a plus athlete. I think that's something really big. He gives you what you want. You know, there's stuff to develop with route run and release. I think with everyone in this class, there is. Some are obviously a lot higher up than others, but they've been doing it at a high level for multiple years at a high division level. Obviously, TCU up there, but fighting to get on the field at times. I think Jack Besh has grown phenomenally. I think he's got some of the best hands in the class, and he's going to keep continuing with the contested catch rates and everything else. I do think he gets to keep growing. I would like to see a little bit better of a yards after catch ability with that kind of athleticism. But besides that, everything else just kind of checks the box for me. Production-wise, obviously, it's a little above average, but nothing spectacular that would vault him up the board. But I think he just fits in a kind of a down receiver class is what we've been, blessed with over the few years. I think he fits in as a very reliable, late day 2, not even late day 2 anymore, a day 2 guy that really can produce as a wide receiver 2 for a team if, worst case wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines. I think he does have the best hands in the class when you just I mean, Ted McMillan, who we'll talk about in a little bit, I think is by far the best contested catch guy, but Besh catches everything. And whether he's got defenders hanging on him or he's wide open, he doesn't have any of those like I hate concentration drops. I don't know if they're concentrating or not. But he doesn't have any of those like mental lapses where he just drops wide open balls either. He eats up everything. I do think, like Randy said, the yards after catch stuff, I think maybe it was a product of that TCU offense because, I don't think he's very fast. I think he's fast enough. I think there's some stuff that he can do after the catch that we didn't really get to see at TCU. But a really impressive offseason, I guess, or pre-draft process. I think he's had momentum since before the Senior Bowl. I think people finally got their eyes on Savion Williams, and then they noticed him on the other side. And I think he's just been continuing to vault upward. I think when you're starting to look at it, I think he's a round 2 player. I think teams like Atlanta or Arizona or someone where you think they might take a wide receiver in the first round, but they have other needs, or even like Dallas, I think he could be a really nice complement to CeeDee Lamb. So there's a ton of really good fits. I think he's in that, like, everyone wants to know who the next Puka Nacua is. It's not him because he's getting drafted a lot higher. But as far as skill set goes, I think they're similar players, which I think we know now that that's a pretty successful mold at the NFL level.
Yeah, I think what I envision him being able to do day one is what we kind of got from like Cedric Tillman this year, where we had to wait a while for Tillman to get the space to get on the field. So I think that's where that can really help out is he should be able to get on the field with how the wide receiver cores are flexing out this week and this year. I do definitely think, like you said, all those landing spots are perfect. He can be a very nice complementary two-piece to any of these teams with a top receiver, especially guys that win in and outside like a CeeDee Lamb. So you can just keep back and move him around wherever CeeDee isn't and then have him utilized everywhere. Again, I think he's going to do a lot. He gets open deep, he gets open short, catches everything. So he's good with the contact as well. It's the catch point. Obviously, he needs to get a little bit better at to be a top of this class type of thing. But he can win anywhere, in my opinion. And he just is going to catch and probably go down. It's the only issue.
Yeah. I mean, anytime I listen to an ungodly amount of draft podcasts, it's kind of ridiculous. And every single scout or every person on those podcasts, they always say like, "Oh, I wanted to watch Savion Williams, but you know who kept catching my eye? This Jack Beck guy. Like, and he just catches everything." And if enough people say that, NFL teams have to see that too. Like, if scouts are saying that, if these guys are all saying it, they're gonna be like, "Oh yeah, we need to get this guy." It's interesting. I haven't heard round two in a while. I haven't heard that. So I love Christian's take there. But I do think with a down class-ish, whatever you want to call it, I think people are going to go get their guy. So if they think Jack Beck's their guy in the second round, they will. I mean, I think he fits a lot of offenses too. And I think he can come in right away and just fit a role for our team. That's probably what they're looking at. And his physicality will keep him on that field. He's a physical dude, and he can win the run game as well. Like, I think he's just a coaching staff guy.
Yeah, effort blocker as well. I don't know if it's necessarily the greatest blocking, but there's effort in every play.
Well, it's important to remember too. He was a tight end recruit. They were hoping that he would grow a few inches and be a tight end at LSU. And then when he transferred to TCU, the reason he wasn't productive last year is because he was learning how to play wide receiver. And this was kind of our first look at him learning how to play wide receiver. So I think we still have a ceiling that we haven't seen yet with Jack right now.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Jalen Noel. So we all kind of have Jalen Noel in our 6 and 7. I have him at 6. Iowa State wide receiver. Randy and Christian have him at 7 there. Had a pretty good, I don't know. I guess you could say really good combine. He looked pretty good out there. A lot of people have been talking about him for a while now. I mean, I think Christian was he was one of the first guys to have him in pretty close to like top 5, right? Like before all the kind of the pre-process and all of that. Had a 9.48 RAS with the last time I looked, which could change at any minute. But 40-yard dash 4.39, which you like. 20-yard split was good, 2.57. Vertical 41.5 inches. I mean, that's elite. That's a hell of a vertical for him. Weighed in at 5'10", 194, very strong. Broad, was great, 1102. Like, you like these things. You like the numbers that he put out there, and you like his tape. Like, I loved his tape last year from what he was able to put on the field. Him and Jaden Higgins were really good for an Iowa State team that went pretty far. I mean, they were pretty close to making it to the college football playoff there. What is your take on? I know, we've listened to Christian talk about Noel before, but how do you feel about what he's put out there? Are you happy with that? Having him in the top 7?
For sure. I mean, I think people were questioning his long speed because there were times on film where he just wouldn't pull away. He would get caught from behind if he caught a deep ball. But there were other times where it was like, oh, well, he's like clearly the fastest player on the field. And then he goes out there and runs a 95th percentile 40 at 4.39 with a 1.51 10-yard split, 95th percentile. Like, and that's not even the best part of his game. The best part of his game is how explosive he is off the line of scrimmage. I think that's what really catches your eye. You turn on the film, and I think maybe it made me question Jaden Higgins's explosiveness and his ability to get off the line. We'll talk about him shortly because he tested really well too. But Noel was just he every single snap, it was like there were 4, 5, 6 releases each game where he's just burning corners, especially if they press him. He eats up space really well. I think he's one of those guys that just does all of the little things as well. I think he's a willing blocker. I think that he gets open, especially underneath. I think he can play. He reminds me a lot of Josh Downs. And I think when you look at how he tested, I think it was even better than what Josh Downs did. So I think this is another player where I think draft media has been a little bit down on as far as where he's going to go in the draft. I think he's not making it out of day 2, in my opinion. I think there's a chance that he goes ahead of Higgins. I think that chance is a lot lower now that the combines happen. But man, I really like him. Around 7 or 8. Obviously, we talked about Tez Johnson at my 9, and I'm pretty skeptical of that. This is about the cutoff for like guys I'm comfortable with, but I think all of these guys 8 and higher are good players.
Yeah, he screams impact to me. I think that is, no matter what, he's a good special teams weapon as well. And, with under 4.40 at the combine and that vert, it just shows his explosiveness and his ability to break away. I think he is obviously going to be a slot at the next level a little bit more consistently. The hope would be that he can go to an offense like the Colts that's a bit more inventive, so he can go inside and outs like Downs. But I do like, I'm sure I made a face when you said it. I do like that, just because me and Christian both really loved Downs. Obviously, we were doing that draft a little bit before we did this podcast. I'm not fully aware of Kevin's take on that, but I do think he can just manipulate and make a lot of big plays. He's very good at the release. I have him tied with the best release of the whole class so far. And the physical testing is just basically check the box for everything that you want to see. I do think he really wins with sharp and crisp routes in the intermediate, but I do think, along with Downs, the streaks into the open parts of the zones, the corners, and the posts, I think is where he's going to make his living. A little bit like a tight end, where he kind of attacks the field.
Yeah, I've been trying to find comps for him. I'm really struggling because I went on Raz calculator and I was trying to throw some up there, but he tested so well, Jalen Noel, that I'm like, damn, like I even threw Torrey Holden there just for some fun. He tested way over him. Steve Smith, he tested over him, and so like the numbers really pop off. Like the numbers really with the basically just his measurements and everything there. And when you combine that with the film, man, I mean, I think there's a team that could look at him in like round 2 and be like, I love Jalen Noel. Like Xavier Leggett went where he went. Jalen Noel could go in that same range too, because I mean, I was never a big Leggett fan. And like, I think Noel is a better prospect than him. Like he is. And I think that he's a better refined receiver than he was at this point. So like, there's going to be a team that really likes Noel. And I think that he's versatile as well. It's just going to come down to really what's going to push these wide receivers down a little bit, maybe possibly, is the depth at the defensive line and like the edge class, and kind of like once you start looking at where's that tier for these teams, like, hey, we're going to build our hog mollies up front. We're going to look for that defensive, line presence and that basically build the depth there. Okay, when are we going to take a wide receiver that isn't necessarily premier wide receiver that can give us depth? That's why maybe some of these guys go in that 3rd round. I think that's kind of where I'm at with these wide receivers. Doesn't mean they can't be good, though. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be good for fantasy either. I think Noel is one of those guys in that range that he's just really popping off for me. That's why I'm at 6. Like I really think a team's going to fall in love with him. I think a team's going to have a plan for him inside out. I think he can do both, in my opinion. I actually do. And I think that a team that needs a wide receiver too. I mean, the Steelers could be an option for them. Like I think that's a great fit for them alongside of Pickens. I think he does a lot of things that Pickens maybe doesn't or isn't able to do on the inside. So I would love for him to go there. Any last thoughts on Noel?
Another little pro comp I've been thinking more is like Jaden Reed and the kind of impact he can have all over the field.
Yeah.
So a guy that, was drafted to a team, like, why are they drafting him? They've already drafted so many of these kind of day 2 guys. Is it going to work out? And then the further we got through training camp, I was like, okay, well, that's why he's taking over the snaps.
Right. My thing with the Steelers that you mentioned, Kevin, this is what the Steelers thought they were getting from Roman Wilson.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the injury really hurt Roman Wilson last year. Maybe they still believe in him and they're going to give it another shot. But if they want to re-roll it, I think 52 is where they're picking right now. I think that's a pretty good range for Noel right now.
Yeah, and I don't think Roman Wilson was as good of an athlete as Noel. Like, not
No.
even close. Like,
And
that's
in fairness, neither was Reed or Downs,
yeah,
I believe.
that's fair. No, I know, and they could just be like, man, we messed up on the Wilson pick. Like, that's just probably kind of how it goes there. All right, let's have some fun with this. Christian, the board is open. What guy do you want to talk about? Where are you at? You want to talk about your boy Torrey Horton?
Briefly, since you guys don't have him in the top 10, I think this is a kid that a lot of people are forgetting about in Torrey Horton. Injured really early, Colorado State wide receiver, for those who have never heard that name, because quite frankly, I'm like Kevin, I listen to a lot of draft podcasts. There's not too many folks still talking about Torrey Horton, but when you watch the film from 2023, especially, you see, man, I see a lot of Deontay Johnson in this game, where I think he can be an explosive yards after catch player. There's some question marks on how good his hands are, similar to Deontay, but super, super productive in an offense that everyone knew the ball was going to him. So that's when you have those smaller school guys, you're like, okay, well, the level of competition isn't as good. When there's one guy that is consistently getting the ball and still being productive, I find that to be impressive. Horton, to me, is one of the better yards after catch players in this class. I think he's got iffy route running right now. I think on the short stuff, he's really good. When you're asking him to go downfield, I don't love it as much, but I think this is a player with a ton of upside and super athletic. Came back after that injury. I think he's like a 9.71 relative athletic score or something like that right now. I'll double check that, but just a really impressive combine. And I think putting him back on the map for folks considering him, I think he's probably more like a round 4, round 5 player, but I think you're going to get something out of Torrey Horton at the NFL level.
441 got him drafted probably higher than he was going to get drafted. I think that's because I think there's some concerns there, especially coming off the injury there. But yeah, no, I think he was close. I almost got him in my top 10. I'll be honest. Like there's a lot of guys in that range. We talked about a pre-show that could have jumped into that 10 spot, that 9 spot for us. Randy, give me a guy. Who do you want to talk about? Maybe that we haven't mentioned. We're going to talk about Matthew Golden when we get to the top 5 because you're a hater for whatever reason. Like I don't know what that is about.
Not a hater.
But we'll talk about why you're a hater. But anybody else in there?
Well, I will. I guess I'll speak on the guy that is the reason he's not in the top 5. If you would like me to do that, so we can focus on him when we get there. And that's Jaden Higgins, who just barely edged him out. I think he is possibly a better athlete overall, according to what we were expecting. Everything, but the production's off the charts. Obviously, this is like half point, difference between the two. But there's just a little bit more on tape and more consistency that I like from Jaden Higgins. I think he does everything well. Good release package, pretty decent route runner. Shows a good understanding of leverage and tempo and fitting into the open zones and just using everything he has to win at the next level against any kind of corner. Especially I've seen a lot of contested catch with that catch radius. He's dominating in every position possible out there. Some of the best hands in the class as well. And you compare that with the catchability and everything we're doing when you're, working towards the outside, working towards the inside. I think we showed some versatility playing all over the field. I do think he'll end up as an outside receiver, though. But ball tracking wise, everything I really like. Physicality and blocking, I think, could improve. I just think a lot of times it wasn't necessarily asked fully of the receivers in this team to just focus on it. But either way, I think Jaden Higgins is just a very consistent wide receiver that can win at any level, pretty much against any size corner and everything possible. So I just think it's something where I've seen a lot of it, and I think we'll continue to see that. And that's why his production numbers are going to be off the charts when we do the calculations. It's among the best in the class for a reason, because he just continually is showing it. And I do think he's just an NFL starter.
Okay. Yeah, Kevin, why are you a hater?
I'm not a hater there. I think for me, I mean, maybe he's too low for me. But I just think that I don't know. You guys think he's explosive? So that's my big one. Like I just think that explosiveness, that lack of like that ability to kind of get vertical sometimes. I think he's very good in contested catches. I think he's physical. I think he does that well. But I think what's holding me back with him is he's limited in offense based on that lack of explosiveness.
I think that's fair, because I think I question that too. And so you turn on that film, and like I said, Noel made me feel like Higgins wasn't this type of athlete. And then he goes out there and his explosive, like his jumps, 39-inch vertical and 10.8 broad, like 92nd percentile on both of those. So it,
It
what
didn't show up on tape though.
no, and
That's
so
what's
I
weird.
think that's where like is that a product of him being so smooth and them not asking him to get vertical all the time, and so there's a little lack of experience with it.
Mhm.
One of my main concerns, you kind of look down at like some of the RAS comps for him. Braylon Edwards is on there, and I kind of like that as a comp, but
Yeah.
I also don't. I think what Braylon Edwards did in the NFL was just rotted on a Browns team. So, like, I think there's a world in which Braylon Edwards has a better NFL career than he did. But I do get a little concerned that, like, Higgins comes in. He is that prototypical X wide receiver, I think, that can move inside, like Randy talked about. But I just wonder what his production level is going to be like at the NFL level.
You know who he screams and why I'm so nervous? Tyler Johnson from Minnesota, the old wide receiver that Christian liked him a lot.
I did.
So like I just see a little bit of Tyler Johnson, Jaden Higgins. That's probably why I'm a little lower. I still have him in my top 10, and he might need to go higher, right? Like he should probably. I mean, I know most people are going to see Ty Felton on here and be like, "What is this dumbass talking about?" He should probably be higher than Ty Felton. But I like Ty Felton. I think that he had a very good combine. I think that when you're looking at like the testing numbers and everything for him, like 4.37 40 was great, because I think the one question mark I had, and a lot of question marks that they had with Felton there, I kept seeing like not a vertical threat, top end speed question marks. Well, at 4.37, to me, that's a vertical threat. I think the Maryland offense was weird because I think I saw the number written somewhere. I forget who wrote it. I think Kyle Crabb wrote it. He was talking about Ty Felton, and he said like almost 40% of his catches came on screens this last year, which does not shock me at Maryland because Maryland's offense is predicated on that. So maybe the thing with Ty is you're betting on ceiling here because maybe they just didn't put him in the best possible spots to win the way he can win, because I do think that maybe we're underestimating him as a route runner because maybe he just didn't do it. I think he's a natural separator, so I think Ty Felton can do that. I think he creates separation. I think he can be a quick route runner. I do think that, hey, he can be explosive within zone as well. Like there's a lot of things I like about Ty Felton, but I love that he went out there and ran that 4.37. Now, again, I know it's the underwear Olympics. I get that they're not running a straight line, but maybe Maryland didn't do that for him. And we're looking at the raw numbers. I mean, he's a 4-year kid. This last year was his big year, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, 80.2 receiving grade. You really like that. I think the other thing I really like is versatility, 30% in the slot. That's not bad. You could be out wide as well. Yak per reception wasn't great. ADOT, not great, but that's because it predicated on that Maryland offense. So the big question I have for Felton is, all right, who are we getting here? Are we getting like, hey, this kid was held back by an offense in college and that he can do a lot of these different things? Or is it just he's a workout guy and then he's going to go back to what he couldn't do at the college level? I think that's the biggest question mark I have about Felton.
Yeah. I think he's one of the best ball trackers in the class. I think he's up there with, Tet McMillan, Ibuka. He's close to Matthew Golden. I think Matthew Golden is the best ball tracker in the class. But when you're talking about like him actually, when he was able to get vertical, I think we saw a lot of signs that he can do that. I am concerned about the route running, and maybe that is a product of what they asked him to do versus what he can do. There were times where like they would ask him to run a dig, and it was just like this rounded route, and then he didn't get the ball, and I'm worried that those habits and that lack of suddenness, I guess, is going to appear on the NFL film as well, and be kind of inhibit him from being a better player. But I think there are signs that he's a really good player. Really good yak player. There's a reason he had so many yards and really only got screens. And that is the athleticism, I think. I certainly didn't anticipate him being that elite, though. I think that was a definite good showing at the combine this week.
Yeah. All right. Anything else for these guys in the top 10? Randy, you got anything else on these guys, Christian?
No.
You'll have to talk with Jay about Alec because I don't see it, man. I don't see it.
I mean, I had him in my top 10 because I thought he tested well.
He did.
But I struggle with, I mean, some have him top 5, like some have him at number 2, 3 in that range. Like I'm not there yet. I think his testing, I think testing wise, and I think he's going to get the draft capital. I think Alec is going to get that. So I think the question is like, do you love him in those spots? Probably more like, see, I wasn't a big Cedric Tillman guy. Like I did not think Cedric was all that great. I remember he got drafted day 2 barely, and all the analytics guys ran their victory laps, and then what do we get? So I think the question for me is like, what's Alec 2? I think that's where I'm at with him. Not crapping on Jay at all, analytics guys. All right, let's get into our top 5. So here's my top 5. I got Ted McMillan at 1, Luther Burden at 2, Emeka Ibuka at 3, Travis Hunter at 4, Matthew Golden at 5. And then Randy's got Ted McMillan at 1, Emeka at 2, Travis Hunter at 3, Luther Burden at 4, and then Jaden Higgins, like he just mentioned, he talked about why he knocked out Matthew Golden in that spot. And then Christian's got Ted McMillan at 1, Emeka at 2, Luther Burden at 3, Matthew Golden at 4, and then Jaden Higgins at 5. The one omission you might see from Christian's list is Travis Hunter. Christian did not grade Travis Hunter as a wide receiver. He's graded him as a corner. That's why he has him where he has him. Me and Randy think he's dumb. Not dumb. That's a bad word. How should I say this? We disagree with that assessment because we think that he's going to be enough. He's going to get enough reps at wide receiver, or he could still get taken as a wide receiver. And maybe that's what the team's going to use him. He is a very special case here. He's a pain in the ass to grade because he's just hard to know what a team's going to use him as. But if a team comes out and drafts him, that Thursday, obviously, and says, hey, he's our wide receiver 1, then you're going to probably put him in the top 2, if not 1. Like, I think that's the kind of level of talent he has in this class. So that's kind of where I'm at with Travis. I think Randy's in the same spot with him. Anything else to add about Travis Hunter, Christian, in that range?
If I do grade him as a wide receiver, I think he's my 3 or 4. I did the grading, but then I took him out because I don't want him in the database twice, because I just want to know what his separate grades are at each one. It, like you said, if a team comes out and says he's primarily a wide receiver for us, then I will grade him and he'll probably land inside that top 5. So if you want to hate me in the comments right now, that's fine. But these guys have him ranked, so he's still in our consensus. But I'm just holding off because I do think his best position is at corner. And then if that's where a team is playing him, say he's still going to play both sides of the ball, which I think he wants to. I think some team would be smart to try it. I just don't see him being impactful enough to break this top 5 if 70% of his snaps are coming on the defensive side of the ball. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and that's fair. And, I think he is just such a natural freak that he just is elite at both positions, and that's just something we haven't really seen. And I I even have a -1 modifier for him because he's practicing 50-50 right now at Colorado and at Jacksonville State and in high school. So he's never truly had 100% practice anywhere. And I think you see that a lot in the technique aspect of both positions. So I do think, release and route running package for him on offense can be better. I do think it's above average right now. But obviously, if I saw him actually dedicating to that all the time, I know he would be really, really good. But he doesn't actually have to currently. From what we've seen, he just has some of the best hands in the class, if not the best. Is amazing in the traffic, at high point in the ball tracking, physicality. He can make plays after he catches it. He is just always wherever the ball needs to be, and he makes the plays. He's great at coming back when Shador's dancing, whether he had to or not, and he helps make the plays. He outsmoves everything. And then, when we get to the defensive stuff, we'll talk about all the craziness that he could do there. But I do agree with Christian to where I think most teams are going to view him as a 70-80% corner and then 30 to 20% receiver, which will increase as needed. And, again, if he's picked by the Giants at 3 this year, he is going to be their corner 2 and wide receiver 2 at the same time, right off the bat. Obviously, I think has potential to be the best corner on that team, but he doesn't have the potential to be the best receiver, I think, at this point. But that's because they're completely different receivers. We're never going to see statistically a guy that catches the ball so close to the line of scrimmage and makes plays after the catch versus a guy like Hunter that can just make plays regardless and mostly downfield up against a 1-on-1 against any other DB in the country or the league at that point. So I do think he deserves to be top 5 for anyone, but I understand why Christian doesn't want to rank him, simply because we probably have to put his name in here as Travis Hunter WR and Travis Hunter CV to make the database not kill us, because I'm sure it already wants to with me putting him as wide receiver.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I think, when it comes down to Travis, he's just such an exceptional player. I would love for him to pick a position now, because I think he could be a Hall of Fame elite player one way. Like, I think that whatever way he chose, he would be that. I think my biggest concern with Travis Hunter is if he wants to do the whole two-way thing and he's never going to reach his max potential on both sides of the ball. Like, I think that's my biggest thing. Not to say he can't. Like, he is a special athlete. I think that's my biggest concern with him, because I love seeing talented players do amazing things, and he's really that. Like, you don't win the Heisman if you're not. Yeah, I know he shouldn't have won the Heisman, Christian. We don't need to go there, but like he did, right?
Back episode. That's okay.
He did, and when you see that, like, I mean, that's a big part of like his game. I absolutely love the kid. I think that it's going to be interesting where he goes. Like, I'm really like, who the hell is going to draft him? I think one thing too to know, just from the combine and listen to everybody, I think some scouts don't know what the hell to do with him either. I think some teams don't know what to do with him. So that's the thing. Draft. I hope he gets drafted by somebody that says, hey, this is your role. This is what we see you as. This is in an interview process is like, hey, this is what you're going to do. Okay. Are you okay with that? Yeah, let's roll. And then they just go with it.
I think the team and him are going to want him to be a Patriot. Plain and simple. It's a coach that's already spoken about playing both ways, an absolute competitor and elite football IQ, which is what Travis Hunter is.
And the Patriots done this before. We've seen them use corners, wide receivers, different roles. Never an athlete like this, but they have the secondary. Maybe they don't need him as much, but they need a wide receiver one. So like maybe they look at that and say, hey, this is a fit for us right now.
Who's the corner that just did that last year, Randy? Can you think of his name?
For what?
For New England. Remember when
is it Matthew Jones? It's not Jonathan Jones. It's Marcus Jones. Maybe?
Maybe
he's their kick returner. He played some receiver as more of a screen guy and a breakout play guy.
And he was also a slot corner.
Yeah, he is their slot corner. The reason why it fits the Patriots so much is because they have one outside corner and one of the best young corners in the league, and then they have no outside corner besides that. They just have like 4 slot corners. So it makes the most sense for him to go there. And then they also have no big body receiver one. And not necessarily like Travis Hunter is like a hulking figure out there like Ted is at times, but he's bigger than a lot of the receivers they have now, at least playing style wise.
Yeah. All right, let's jump over to Matthew Golden. Let's talk about him. I mean, I know we mentioned Jaden Higgins on the flip side, but for Matthew Golden, I have him at 5, Texas wide receiver. Christian has him at 4, so he's a little higher on there, just probably because Hunter. I have Travis Hunter ranked. So Matthew Golden came out and did well in the 40-yard dash. When you see that 4.29, I believe, was a confirmed number, I think, for him. So he was one of the Texas players that actually was not lying about their 40. We'll talk about Isaiah Bond later and Jaden Blue, but really looked well in the 40-yard dash, 10-yard split, 20-yard split, looked amazing. Size, you're looking at him, 5'10", 191 is fine. Great ball tracker out there at Texas. I thought he was their best wide receiver at Texas this year. I mean, he was one of those guys that Quinn Ewers really looked to, especially in the playoff against Arizona State was one of his best games. 7 catches, 149 yards, and that touchdown. Receiving grade this year, 75.6, which isn't amazing, but when you're going over kind of what he was asked to do in that offense, I mean, he was really good. 83 targets, 58 catches, 987 yards. People forget, too, he wasn't at Texas before this year. He was at Houston, and he looked good, but he hadn't put the numbers that he put up at Texas there. Really kind of dove into that offense. That tells me a couple things just from an intangibles perspective about Golden. He could pick up offenses quick. He kind of became the lead dog in that room that had a lot of guys in that room that wanted to be the lead guy. So I'm a big fan. I think Golden's in that top 5. I do see some like wide receiver 1 takes out there. I'm not ready to do that. I saw that he'll be like the wide receiver 1 off the board. I don't think that. I think that maybe a team likes him. We've seen weird things go where like a team likes him as a wide receiver 2. I think there's a combo to be happen there, like a conversation. Like, yeah, I could maybe see that, but I'm not at 1 yet with him. Christian, you have him at 4, so you're a little higher.
I am. I think this wide receiver one talk is a little crazy though. I think there's a very, I wouldn't say like big tier break, but like there's certainly a tier break between Tet and the rest of the guys for me. Um, that said, Golden was incredibly impressive. I think when it comes to ball tracking, I kind of talked about that earlier, but he really saved Quinn Ewers at times this year with really bad deep balls. His ability to adjust in the air or come back for the ball. He's really instinctual when it comes to that. And then you talk about his ability to get open on the line of scrimmage. I think he's really explosive. I think he's got really sharp routes. He does all of the things that you want from a wide receiver one. I comped him in my top 50 because he made my top 50 to Stephon Diggs. I see a lot of Stephon Diggs in his game, and I don't see a lot of the Stephon Diggs personality problem in Matthew Golden. Might see it in his teammate or former teammate Isaiah Bond, but I don't see it as much with Matthew Golden. So I think this has been. I was shocked that he came out, and initially when him and Jaden Blue declared, I was like, "What the heck are these guys doing?" And I get it with both of them. I think Golden probably pushes for a pick in between like 15 and 32. I do think he's going to be a first rounder at this point, just because I think he might finish the rest of his testing. It's important to note he didn't get a relative athletic score. He just ran. He didn't do any of the explosiveness or the agility stuff. But I think if he does that at the pro day, we're going to see like a 90th percentile athlete. And if we get that, then I think we're talking about a first round pick, potentially back at like the Rams makes sense. Houston makes sense. The Chargers honestly make some sense because they don't have a guy exactly like Golden. So there are some teams at the back of round one or teams that could trade up and, pair their quarter, like the Browns, for example. Say they take a quarterback, they come back into the back of round one and get Matthew Golden. I think that's kind of where he'll land at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a good NFL receiver. I think if, like Christian said, I was also a bit shocked he didn't come back and just try and roll with, Manning and make this work and become, hopefully the wide receiver one of next year's class. So I think that's where some of the limitations come from me. I think he's got to get a little bit better with release, especially against press, and his physicality, consistent blocking. But everything else is just what you want for an NFL receiver. I've heard the Diggs take a few times now. Obviously, I'm sure Christian to be first, in a text, but Olave, I see a lot too. And I think both really make sense where they're just consistent wide receiver one options for teams for their prime of their career.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm on board there. I think he's a great ball tracker. I think he can kind of be a high level wide receiver too. I think he can do that for a team. Like I don't think I ever see him being a wide receiver one, but I do think that he can be a very like Olave type wide receiver too. Right. And I think people shot Olave up too much. I think that what Olave is a wide receiver too. I think Golden can do that as well.
Yeah, he's a wide receiver too in fantasy, but he is the wide receiver one of the Saints. I think that's kind of
should he be though? That's the question.
I mean, in that room, yeah, but yeah, sure. Would he be wide receiver one against Jamar Chase? No, but
well,
is he
so
better
you
than
guys bring
Smith?
up.
Then we're in a different conversation.
Well, that's the thing. I was going to say there's some Devontae Smith qualities to Golden too. As far like the ball tracking stuff from your number 2 wide receiver, I think is really important to have, especially if you've got a big body possession type of guy. So that's kind of like, it's not the play style comp because Golden's like 20 pounds heavier, 30 pounds heavier, but there's some of that to it where I think Golden can be a high level number 2. I think there are times though that like he can be a 1. I think Diggs was a 1, but had a solid 2 where, like Thielen was always with him. And then in Buffalo, it kind of got a little rough because he was the only one towards the end there. So I'm curious to see where he lands because I think that does impact what his upside is.
Yeah, he does have the knack of what you want to see from a reliable top receiver of just always making the big play when needed.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into the top 3 here. So let's just kind of talk about them. We'll go around and see what you have. So we all kind of have the same top 3. Well, kind of. Randy's got Travis Hunter as number 3. He's got Luther Burden at 4, and then he has a Mecca at 2 and Ted McMillan at 1. We all have Ted McMillan at 1. I have Luther Burden at 2. These guys have a Mecca Buka, and then we just flip it, basically. Christian's got Luther Burden at 3. Randy's got him at 4, with Travis Hunter being there. So when we look at these 3, so Ted McMillan did not test. There's a lot of questions about Ted McMillan. I think that there's a lot of people out there. I mean, there's some that are comparing him to Drake London. And I think when Danny Jeremiah, he put out like a tweet and he compared both of them. They do fit very close. Like when you're looking at Ted McMillan and the measurables and everything there. I think the question with Ted is that people have a lot of questions about is like, I think his athleticism, I guess. I think if he's not going to test, I haven't seen he's going to run at the pro day yet. I haven't seen what he's going to do. From overall, I think there's some question marks still there. But I guess this is my question then. So if Randy, if he doesn't run, like let's say he doesn't test at his pro day, maybe he does a drill, some of the drills and stuff, but he doesn't do the 40 because I don't know how good his 40 would really be. I'm not sure what that's going to be. Does that change for you where you're at? Did you keep him at 1 just based on default, or how are we feeling about if he doesn't like actually do any drills?
I think he's still 1 of this class. I don't think there's any changing that because again, like you said, if he doesn't test, then we're just going off pure film and what we're assuming the athleticism from tape and from what we, spring and everything like that we've seen. And with that, he's among, he's up in the top 5 to 10 of the wide receiver class with athleticism score currently. I think he gave you the production you needed at the level. He was a consistent option. He showed great everything. I mean, obviously there's some things you want to clean up necessarily, but I mean, like you said, Drake London is a common comp, Mike Evans as well. Mike Evans obviously hit the ground running. Drake London, not really. That was quarterback a little bit as well. Mike Evans really didn't matter, it felt like. So I think the in-between is probably where we're going to fall with Ted. And that's why I think we're seeing so many people in the community start to drop him down the boards when we're talking about actual mock draft. He's now consistently going outside of the top 10 and kind of like a safety, like, okay, we're going to pick him, around where like Olave and around where all these other receivers go in the middle of the draft of the first round. And they've all been, for the most part, all of them been pretty successful. But I think the testing can catapult him back up into the top 10 conversation. So that's why I think he does test.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to vertical like 50 inches. So I'm not super worried about it. And I think he's shown explosiveness to have a good broad jump. If he doesn't test, though, Drake London didn't test, and he was the wide receiver 1 in a class that had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And there were just a ton of guys where it was like, well, where does Drake London fall in this? The film's really good. Is he only a jump ball guy was the question. And I think we have the same questions about Tet, and the answer for me back then with Drake London was no, he can actually like run routes and get open. The answer for Tet is no, he can actually run routes and get open. Arizona offense just wasn't very good. Noah Fafita just was not very good this year, and Tet was still really good for them, despite taking. Once again, it's similar to that Torrey Horton discussion where like. You knew where the ball was going for Arizona, and it didn't matter. Ted McMillan was still getting open and being dominant on a week-to-week basis. So I think he's one of the best catch point receivers I've ever evaluated. I think that he is a physical type of player. I think there are times where he doesn't want to be physical, but I don't necessarily think that that's a product of him not being able to do that. I think he's got some of the surest hands in the class. So I mean, this is one of those where I think people are overthinking it. I think if he decides not to test, people are really going to overthink it. And then we'll see what happens. I mean, Drake London going first that year was shocking to me for what it's worth. He was my wide receiver 1, but I didn't anticipate that he would be the first one off the board. I think we'll see that again with Tet, but if he goes wide receiver 3 or even 4 or something like that, I'm not going to panic. He's still going to be my wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I would imagine most teams think if he fully tests, he would run like a 4 or 5. Yeah, I don't think everyone's it would be if he ran a 4.52. I don't think teams are checking him off the board, But if he goes into the 4.4s, I think teams will be like, okay, well. It's a little bit more smoother than we're thinking, and it just doesn't show as fast as he really is. And those are really the only things we're concerned about is like top end breakaway speed.
If you put him in last year's class, where would you guys have him? 4, wide receiver 4, Marvin Harrison, Malik, Brian Thomas Jr.,
Give me 1 second.
Rome, Adonai Mitchell's been there last year at this time. Like Ladd, Keon Coleman was up there, but I wonder where you would put him. 3,
Wide receiver 4
4,
for me.
4 for me
I
as
would have
well.
I would have had him just ahead of. Well, I love Troy Franklin, R.I.P. And Brian Thomas Jr. So
Okay.
that kind of range.
Yeah,
But Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Rome were
would be right there.
significantly higher for me than what Ted is.
All right.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting conversation. Think about last year. Okay, yes, it's a down wide receiver class. Where would you put him in last year's class? But if a team needs somebody, I don't know. There's some teams there. You really think the Panthers, if Ted McMillan was sitting there and they have Bryce and everything there, where the Panthers aren't going to take him? Like, that's just, I don't know. They might. I mean, I know that the way they build their team and everything, their roster, I know
they're
that
dumb
GM
over there.
Well, that's also the problem. Yeah, there are some dumb teams out there. I mean, and then the other two guys, I mean, there's not a ton to talk about that much because they didn't really test. I mean, Luther ran. So the one thing about Luther Burden, I think he checked the box. I don't think he got like stock up or down. He just checked the box because I think the question for him was really like, all right, what's his 40 going to be? 4.41? Okay, we'll take that. Box check there. I think the big thing with Burden is mental side. Like, that's what I keep hearing a lot from a lot of people is like, what is he going to be with? Like, how's his mental makeup? How's his like diva moments, they called them, right? And I think that's the question mark with Burden, but I think he tested well enough to be a first round draft pick. Emeka didn't test, which I hate. I wish he would out there and competed there. I don't know what he's going to do at his pro day, but I like Emeka. I mean, I basically have those two sliver, like there's a sliver between them. I like what Luther can do from like an athletic perspective. I like that he ran and he went out there and tested. But to me, they're back and back. Like, it's really just going to come down to landing spot for me, how I flip those guys there. But I do like that Luther ran though. And I do like he came in the 4.41 range, that low 4.4 mark. I would have loved to see a 4.39. That would have been awesome for his stock a little bit more. But I think a team drafts him second, him and Emeka and Golden. I think they're in that range for me in terms of just a pure wide receiver. Christian, where are you at with Emeka, or excuse me, with Luther?
I mean, I was really happy to see him run. I wish he would have finished the testing out because I think his agilities and explosiveness would have been great. My thing with like Emeka, you wonder how much of that is, okay, he took time to recover after the longest college football season we've ever seen, and he wants to make sure that he's fully healthy before running. So I think he'll probably run at his pro day, but we know that those numbers get juiced up. And so then you're like, I wish he would have just run at the combine. But like Daniel Jeremiah was talking about all weekend, this is kind of the new normal where these guys who know that they're, top 50 picks don't feel the need to run, which is what it stands out to me about Luther is he wanted to go out and prove that he was fast. Not that anyone was questioning that, but I think the mental side of things where everyone is kind of questioning that, I think his willingness to go compete is definitely a positive out of this weekend. As far as like the film goes, it's really good. He's my 3, but it's a point difference between a point difference between him and Emeka in my grading scale. So I think they're both quality NFL starters that are going to come in and be immediate impact type of guys. There's really not a whole lot separating them. I think actually they're very similar players in that you can put both of them inside or outside. They can win with their athleticism. They can be strong contested catch guys as long as Luther is engaged and willing to, go compete. I think there were times on film where I didn't have that assumption that he was wanting to go compete out there. So I think if he's engaged, locked in, that we have a solid top 3 here for sure.
Yeah, but you just stated the difference. That's why Emeka is 2 by over 2 points for me. You're never questioning the desire and effort from Emeka Egbuka. And he's an NFL pro through and through. He's going to break down the film. He's going to know what the best routes are for every corner he's going to face. I just don't see that for Luther Burden. I also didn't see an even equal 2024 season compared to 2023. So, obviously, I think there's a reason, going into this year, he was competing to be the wide receiver 1, and that was completely rightfully so. but like you said, wasn't locked in. Quarterback injuries, everything going through. I completely get it, but it really there was no improvement I saw from this film this year, and that was something that I have to note, just plain and simple, because we've seen plenty of receivers not be engaged at the NFL level. And if you're going to put out not engaged film and no effort at times, you're going to be gone.
Yeah, that's
fair.
true. I don't know. I've been burned a lot by these type of guys, though. I like what Luther has on tape, though, and I think that he has a ceiling there. I think Luther has a higher ceiling than Emeka, though, in my opinion. Like just from a pure wide receiver athleticism standpoint, yes. Because I think Emeka, you can still say that while he was great, there was still some consistency issues. I think there was some like, hey, we'd like to see you more in those big moments. I think this year kind of knocked those away, but last year you especially didn't have the season that you would have hoped for. But I like them both. I think that when you're looking at that, it's fine. Wherever they get drafted, you're gonna be like, all right, how are they gonna use them there? I just think you can use a Luther in a lot more different ways than you can with Emeka. That's probably why I have him a little higher there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think ceiling plays, Burden's going to have you, but ceiling career, it's going to be Ibuka.
Okay.
Interesting.
Well, we'll see.
I mean,
we'll see. That's our first fight. This is cute. I like this. So this
And
is
you
our
just
first
said you
fight of the
missed me.
podcast.
It's
I
crazy.
just missed you, but now I don't.
I
But yeah,
told you to change so quickly.
I like it. Like we'll see. Well, I think that Luther could have a better career than Emeka. I think I put that on there right now. That's why I'm at 2. But we'll mark that down on the sheet on the sheet for the yearly shows here. All right, Christian. Any final thoughts on the top 5?
I was just gonna say Ibuka's more Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Burden at his highest is close to Jamar Chase. Like there was a time where I thought that was an outcome for him, but we haven't seen it yet. So now it's more, God, I can't even remember who I comped him to. I don't necessarily think it's Debo.
No, Percy Harvin maybe
Without
the migraines and drugs.
Yeah, it could be. DJ Moore was my comp, which I mean, I'll take for an NFL team. There's a world in which I take DJ Moore over Amon-Ra St. Brown for the versatility, so I kind of get where that's coming from. But Amon-Ra's having a more productive career, so I kind of see both sides of your guys' little beef here that we will absolutely track for years.
Locked in. He obviously the ceiling. It's better.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, that's our top 5 in that range there. We're going to go through our consensus rankings real quick. We're going to talk about it. We can jump in anytime. So these are our top 3 or 4 of us. Jay Stein's rankings are in here as well. So here's our top 15 wide receivers from everybody here at TDR. So wide receiver 1, we have Ted McMillan overall. Wide receiver 2, Emeka Ibuka. Wide receiver 3, Luther Burden. Wide receiver 4 is Travis Hunter. So we still have him in there, even though Christian's a hater. 5 is Matthew Golden, Texas wide receiver. 6 is Jaden Higgins. Trey Harris, wide receiver 7 at Ole Miss. We didn't talk about him, but still very solid player. We'll get into him more as we get closer to the draft. Wide receiver 8, Jalen Noel at Iowa State. Jack Beck comes in at wide receiver 9. Wide receiver 10 is Jalen Royals, who had a very, very solid combine. He's a player out there to watch as well. 11 is Tez Johnson at Oregon. Wide receiver 12 is Isaiah Bond out of Texas. Wide receiver 13, Elegeo Manor from Stanford. Savion Williams comes in at 14, and then Ty Felton comes in at 15. Obviously, I'm the outlier on Mr. Ty. But if you look at wide receiver 12 at Isaiah Bond, I think we're just going to finish it with him. I don't know what the hell to say about Isaiah Bond. I mean, the kid came in, was set up for a very solid year at Texas. Didn't really see that. Saw a lot of diva moments from him on the field. Then when you look at his combine, saying he's going to break the record for the 40-yard dash, and he's going to get 4.142, and then get a 4.4. I mean, that's a problem. I mean, that's just, I think the biggest thing is, and people can say, oh, he was just a kid, he said it, but that goes along with what was going on with him on the field from we saw last year at Texas. That goes along kind of with that diva mentality. A.D. Mitchell had that too, remember? So he had that same kind of red flag question marks there. So he's not in our top 10. I think it's fair. I'm not comfortable putting Bond in my top 10 at all.
No, I mean, same. And I will say, for Kevin's sake, Ty Felton is not a final grade for me by any means.
Okay.
And I think he'll probably end up being ranked higher than Isaiah Bond.
All right. I was a little nervous. Nervous there.
I said for your sake.
Yeah, Isaiah Bond right now is my 13. It's and really it's just based on upside. There's a world in which I grade his film and say, yeah, no, like that's wide receiver 20 or 22. Like the film wasn't that good this year. And granted, there were times where the film was good and he wasn't getting the ball, but how you respond to those things is also important. We just talked about it with Luther Burden and being engaged, and Isaiah Bond just faded into the background at both Alabama and Texas. I think it does go back to Alabama. We talked pre-show. I think something else was going on. New coaching staff in Alabama, sure, but I just think there were things going on at Alabama. And when Bond declared, my initial instinct was that he wasn't going to have. I don't think he was promised a role on the 2025 Texas team.
No.
And I think that's the reason he declared, because right now, I mean, do you guys think he's going day 2 based on upside alone, or do you think he's going to fall further?
Possibly. But I think that would be upside matched with interviews and all these meetings with teams. So unfortunately, besides things getting leaked about how bad it is, we won't actually know. So I do think, again, upside wise, he should go day 2. I mean, he's one of the best athletes. Route running is really good, and after catch and tracking downfield, everything makes sense. It could never fully click for a full year.
Yeah, that's my problem with him. It's like, I think he could go day 2, but I think that he's going to play his way out of the league, possibly, just based on kind of his mindset and what he does. But hey, they're still young. Maybe he comes in, and they're always their GMs. I mean, look at AD Mitchell, got drafted last year. Remember Ballard saying, "Oh, I can't believe what you did to this kid," and it looks like maybe they're right. Like it kind of looks like that too. Like they're GMs that will take a shot and say, "Hey, yeah, that's my guy. He has that talent, that upside." But we all know it comes down to, and we know that we've done this long enough, what staff gets them and how they're able to control them. A guy like Mike Tomlin, he'd be all right. I think he figured it out. But other coaching staffs maybe that don't have that pedigree or everything, I think it could hurt them overall. So that's our top 15. Anything else, Christian, on the top 15 before we wrap this episode up?
No, I mean, I guess, I want to mention Xavier Restrepo. Just, I know he's in a lot of people's top 10s. He chose not to run the 40. I think that was smart because I think it would have been bad. I think he's the first player since 2003 to come in under 5'10" and over 205. So he's a short, stocky build that people say he's always open. I don't know how he gets that way, because he's not super sudden or explosive or anything like that. I'm curious to see where he goes in the draft and what his role will be. But I'm super down on Restrepo. He's my wide receiver 23. So.
It's not that low for me, but I also don't have 23 receivers fully graded, so maybe that's why.
That's fair.
Yeah, he's higher for me. I had him in my big board that I did pre-combine. I think him not doing those things makes me wonder kind of what he is, and I'd like to see some athleticism testing. Let's see the pro days, see kind of how that plays out too. But I do think some guys are vaulting ahead of him. I do think that there are better athletes and better profiles that are kind of going ahead of him as of now. But that wraps it up. We appreciate you guys. We're doing our wide receiver ranks. We're thankful to be back. Thanks for hanging on with us and sticking with us here. We have a fun mock draft coming up on our next episode. We did a 2-round mock, so stay with that. A lot of fun kind of going in there with some trades. I don't know how many trades we had, but not as many as we'd like. But we'll get there at some point. But I made a trade, so that's new for us here on the Quarters Podcast. So we appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys on the next episode.